Now, I think what we are looking at is after the overview of the unit, what I'm trying to cover today. I've got two presentations in particular for Learning Outcome 1 and Learning Outcome 2. Now, in Learning Outcome 1, what we want to be able to do is we'll start with understanding this is called the organizational structure and what impact does it have on the organization in general. So you will see the idea of studying this would be that we will basically look at understanding a particular type of organization has a particular type of culture, a particular type of resources or people working within that department. So in this context, what we are looking at is studying, 3 or 4 different types of organization structures, which will give you a good idea. One, to recognize organizations when you go and see or visit or observe that what kind of a structure they have. And then with that, you'll be able to correlate to what kind of culture they have and what type of people work within that organization. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So looking at, the first presentation, is this true? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Now, first come first, let's look at what is organizing, and then we'll go to organization. So organizing is nothing but, arranging some tasks and activities in a very systematic manner or a fashion, which essentially allows you to achieve the organizational goal. So imagine if you have to kind of tidy up your room. It involves a bit of organization, as we call it, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to try and put together things which belong, together. So, for example, if you're going to have a lot of shoes in your, room, you're going to put shoes onto one side, and then if you have a lot of clothes lying around, you're going to try and put all those clothes or linen together. So, dirty linen for laundry will go in one stack, the other will be for ironing, and the ones which are new or not worn will actually go into the wardrobe. So, what you do is you basically look at organizing the room from a point of view of small activities, which kind of help you in the overall goal of, kind of tidying up your room. So similarly, if we expand that as an example to looking at what organization or organizing means, is nothing but a series of activities which are done in a systematic fashion within an organization, which allows you to contribute or achieve a goal. Now, the example that I gave you is a personal example at home, because your main aim is to basically tidy up your room, to make it more presentable, to make it more livable. But when you look at it from an organizational perspective, if you go into your office and you have a very untidy desk, you might end up having a comment from one of your colleagues or your boss saying that, could you tidy up your desk? It looks messy. It looks, absolutely awful. So if your desk does not look neat and tidy, then it gives an impression to your manager or your colleagues that, the person is not very organized. Yeah. Isn't it? Yeah. So here, when an organization, what we do is at some stage, because we work within large companies and there are lots of businesses which are now global, that means they have businesses and offices across geographies or countries, they have to have something called an organization in the sense which is clearly depicting who's at the top, what role each individual plays at the level in which they are, and how does it overall contribute to achieving the goal. The other would be, how does the top management review if they don't know the organization in terms of its structure. So who's the director, who's the head of department, who's the manager, who's the employee, who's the staff. They need to know these things clearly. So within an organization, you'll normally see, even if it's a small organization or a small business or a large business, you will see that most organizations have a chart. And that chart is an organization chart, so which shows nothing but the structure of the organization in terms of who's at the top, what role they play, and where they report to, and things like that. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Now, an example that we picked up is, this is a department within an organization which works or looks after something called information dissemination within a company. So if you look at, for example, Unilever as a brand, now within that they have a lot of products. It's a very large company, and what they do is there is a department within the company which is called the Information Services Group. Now, this department has the responsibility to put out information in the forms of data and reports to all employees at all levels. So here, if you look at, this is a simple example of how you will see an organizational chart within a department. So there's somebody who's on the top, which is a solutions architect or a person who manages the whole department. And then underneath that, you have different sub and kind of supervisors, and underneath that you have specialist people who work within that particular function. Is that okay? So here, one of the key things will be that if he's putting out information on the website, there is a manager who looks after the website in particular. There is an external person underneath him who works with the agency to ensure that all the information that they are getting is factual. Then there's somebody who catalogs it, and again a person, because it's a large company, so they catalog it. And finally, somebody who looks after designing and then putting it out on the website. Before he puts it out, it is approved by the supervisor and it's approved by the manager of that department before the information is put out to ensure it's absolutely factual and accurate. Now, what we're looking at is there are various stages in which organization structures come up. And there are different types of structures that we want to be able to study. So this is a presentation, but I'm going to take you through some of the key slides. Now, when we look at why do we have a structure, these are the reasons. Now, the structure is, why we want to have a structure is we want to establish a chain of command or chain of control, essentially. So in the house, if you look at, you have a, in the family, when you look at within a house, you have a family, and if you look at the family, there's a husband, there's a wife, you have few kids, you might have your grandparents and things like that. But when you look at that, you clearly, the kid or the child essentially clearly knows where is the chain of command, who is in control. So similarly, when you look at within an organization, the structure is basically drawn up so that it clearly depicts and is able to conform and give a clear idea. That means who is in control, where, and finally where at what level the decision making happens. In case something goes wrong, who has the authority to be able to override that decision. In terms of power would be the budget responsibility. And the last is ultimately who's responsible for the whole project or for the whole department. And then when you look at that, what we do is we can structure the organizations into functional, divisional, matrix, and flat. These are 4 structures that we can use to depict the type of organization, structures within a business or, an organization. And then I've defined some of these things, in one line, which you can go through at a bit later stage. And this is again an example how a chain of command is set up. So you have Chief Executive Officer. Underneath that, you have another layer of, senior management. Again, another layer. And then you have regions. So imagine this as a structure of, say, Coca-Cola. So there's somebody at the top who's the CEO, and there are, say, 3 vice presidents or presidents across 3 different regions. So you have one for Asia Pacific, one for Europe and Middle East, and you have one for North America, Americas in general. And underneath that, you have vice presidents, which basically are maybe major markets. And then within that, you have, say, Nordic region, Benelux, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, things like that. And then within that, we'll have UK, France, Germany, individual countries. But the chain of command in terms of reporting goes backwards in terms of it's like a pyramid. So there is only 1 or 2 people at the top of the organization, and the chain of command means the line of control actually flows from top to bottom in this case. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, also differentiate between, how the chain of command is between different structures. And if you have a flat organization, now flat organizations, we normally tend to find are organizations which are, American organizations in particular. But that does not mean that if you look at a large organization like Microsoft or Apple or HP, some of the big brands, then they will have a complex structure. But when I say flat organization, you look at small businesses, say for example, look at a small restaurant business or a takeaway business, the organization is quite flat. The owner is the director and has access to most of the employees directly. There are not many layers between him and the employees or workers working within the organization. So he's able to direct work to them directly, delegate work to them directly, and also speak and liaison with them almost on a daily basis. But if you look at a large organization, what will tend to happen is that you'll have some sort of a structure which is either divisional, which is a division, or it is a matrix structure, and that will come to example. So this is an example of a structure within a country. So when you look at, say, Hewlett-Packard is a company, they have a UK and Ireland office, and the UK and Ireland operations of the chief executive is basically within the company hierarchy called the general manager within the structure of the organization worldwide. And within that, he has this structure which is basically looking after UK and Ireland operations. So this is just to understand this, the control and chain of commands when you look at from the aspect of looking at organizational structure. Now, going further, when you look at the basic aspects of how organization works, and when we look at control in general, we also defined 5 objectives. We defined things like chain of command, control, responsibility, power, things like that. So here, when you look at the context of power, what we look at is there are 5 different types of power which can be given across to a person within the organization. Now, legitimate means the power is based in one position in the formal hierarchy. That means the position in which the person has power. An example of this will be the President of the United States, for example. Now, he's in the position of power. So he has the power, but as long as the person is in that position, he or she has the power to be able to do everything. But the position itself is associated with the power. It's not Donald Trump as a president or Donald Trump as a person who has the power. It is the president and the position which has the power.
Yeah.
Now, coercive means power is based on fear. You normally find this as an example in, say, for example, in the military hierarchy. So the power is based to a certain extent on fear that if you do this, if you do that, there is this could happen or that could happen, or you could be reprimanded. Reward in general is power based on the ability to distribute something that others value. So here, when you see working within the department, within an organization, your manager will actually distribute power to you depending on your capability and your caliber. So if he or she finds that you're able to perform some tasks extremely well, then in that case, sometimes when he has to pick and choose between the employees given a certain test of task to do or accomplish, they will reward you with some additional powers because you have been a performing person. You have been a responsible person. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Similarly, you have expert. Now, this is what you get to see for a person when they are considered to have expertise or special skills within that field. So you get to see this in a lot of engineering organizations wherein the chief architect or the person who is the project engineer normally is considered to be the final authority in terms of decision making because he or she is an expert within that field to be able to accomplish that task. And then you have the referent, which is power based on the identification with the person who has resources or trait. So here, what we are looking at is the person an example here would be the example of business, wherein what you will look at is if you have a differentiation between the owner of the business and the director of the business in terms of the chief executive, what you will find is that the owner of the business yields more power because he or she is the person who has the resources in terms of money to be able to influence decisions.
Yeah.
So these are things that we have to learn. And if you have the understanding of these concepts, you know what are the basics of when you start working within the organization, you're able to form some of these pretty much instantly, is because your understanding in terms of these terms are available, and it gives you a clear advantage from a point of view of building a working. Briefly looking at a few other things, for example, you must have come across a term called departmentalization. Have you heard about the term called departmentalization?
No.
Okay. A simple example, which supermarket do you go to?
Tesco and Sainsbury's and Asda.
Okay, so if you pick up any of these, when you go to, say, for example, when you go and shop in Tesco's in particular, or Sainsbury's, you normally would find that there are certain items which are kind of clubbed together and put into an aisle. So, for example, you're looking at grocery items, they're in 2 or 3 aisles. If you look at milk and cheese, they're grouped together in one particular aisle. And if you've noticed that within the store, there are 3 or 4 different types of departments. That means 3 or 4 different types of sections within the store. One of the sections within Sainsbury could be the clothing section. One of them could be the fresh fruit and veg and grocery. One of them could be the wines and a couple of other things, or furnishings, home furnishings. And you will also find one of the sections being a section wherein you'll have maybe a cafe, or some sort of a small restaurant. Have you seen that?
Yeah, different departments.
That is correct, different departments. So
Yeah.
when a business is large enough, and each of that section or each of that department of that business is large enough to be able to run functionally on its own, then the company chooses to have something called departmentalization. Right?
Yes.
So if you look at a cafe within, say, for example, Sainsbury, or if you look at a particular section or department within one of these large stores, what you tend to see is that their revenue is as large as any other store in that area, or maybe a local shop in that area. So what they tend to do is, in order for these activities to be managed much more effectively, and have a certain set of responsibility to be able to run that efficiently, the organizations would create something called departments. And each of that department is going to be headed by, say, a manager or a supervisor, depending on the size of the organization. And when you have these departments, they are, kind of grouped into different categories like product, so customer, geography, and process. So a functional department would be when you're grouping the activities by functions performed. And that is where you will see an example of, a car manufacturing company or an automobile manufacturer in particular, wherein all the functions of assembly would happen on the production floor. Right? When you look at products in general, these are activities grouped by products. So that means if sourcing has to be done in Tesco's or Sainsbury, whether it's for rice, or whether it's for vegetables, or whatever, milk, so the sourcing department is going to be productized. That means all the product managers, buyers, merchandisers, buyers and essentially product managers will be all under one department, which is product. They might be sourcing products which are for different departments within the organization, but they're grouped in a product category because all of them are going to be the chief or the key contact to be able to, look at importing products or buying products for Tesco to be able to sell into their stores. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Customer would be, again, we are looking at grouping by customer activities. So here, when you look at customer services, when you look at people on the till, when you look at complaints, when you look at, even sort of the online channels, they'll all be grouped together because they are customer facing. That means at some stage in their operation or in their day-to-day routine, they will essentially be dealing with the customer directly. And then when you look at geographic, it is grouping of activities by territory. That means if you look at Tesco operations within the UK, there is a full department, and from a CEO to down to the employee level, this department works within a particular geography and carries out a group of activities to maximize sales against Asda's and Sainsbury's and Morrison's and a couple of others. But it is a self-sustaining operation. Okay? And similarly, we have process. So process here would be when you look at grouping the activities by workflow or customer, workflow in particular, and that is where the process is. If you go to Tesco's and you bought a product and you want to return it, and you go to any of the Tesco stores, the process to take that back in terms of return is going to be absolutely similar across the 650 stores.
Yeah.
So they will not say that, okay, I'll have to check with the general manager. No, I can't read. If it is within 14 days or 28 days, the product is something which is considered, if it's not a product which is related to personal hygiene, that product will be absolutely taken back and the returns procedure would be absolutely the same across all the stores. Isn't it? Is it okay?
Yeah.
So they can be grouped across, by action. So what I'm going to do is obviously skip through some of the slides and go to the second one, which is go through at a later stage when I send this to you. There is something called a matrix organization. This is a different type of structure. And the matrix type of organization is basically an organization wherein you get to the organization is structured into employees which are permanently attached to one department. But they might have something called an ongoing assignment in which they report to a project, customer, product, or any particular head. So an example here would be, if to understand this better in terms of definition, is a matrix organization is wherein you are an employee of the organization, but because you're in a particular department, sometimes you're asked to work, for other department heads as well. So an example here would be that if you work within, say for example, when you work within, say you're working within, I'll pick up an example of Dell as an organization. Now, when you work within an organization like Dell, what is happening is you're working within the UK operations, and here your main role is you're in sales. But at some stage, when there is an annual conference which happens, once a year, all the sales employees of UK and Ireland geography will actually report into a vice president, or will have a dotted line reporting or working relationship with somebody who's senior enough who manages the whole geography. Right?
Yeah.
And this is an organization which you'll get to see is that the headquarter of that organization is in the US, but all the employees within a particular department, which is, say, for example, the sales department, do speak to each other, across different geographies. And in some cases, they also have dotted line reporting to functional heads or, people senior enough in the organization who manage a particular geography. And this is used with an example here in the slide is, that you have, say, a president of an organization, which is the president of Europe. And if you look at GM, General Motors is a plant. Now, General Motors has operations, the head office is in the US, but they have, various types of operations. They're not just into car assembly or car manufacturing. They also do, electronic other products which are used within the aviation sector, the car automobile sector, and they also produce certain other products which are related to, which are byproducts which are basically used in automobile or other forms of production, car manufacturing. So here, the overall head of the operation is the president of the company, and then he manages 4 different divisions or 4 different types of businesses underneath him. And within each of these divisional heads, what you will have is a head for that particular project or that business. So within the general manager, automation, automotive products, for example, GM has factories across the globe. They have 27 factories. So there are 4 factories in the European geography. And I think recently, if you are aware that the UK operations of Vauxhall were acquired by Renault of France, the company. So GM has sold off their operations in UK to another company, which is which basically operates the Nissan and Renault brand. So here, the vice president of Vauxhall was actually managing all the factories of Vauxhall in 4 countries: in Poland, in Slovakia, in I think in France, and in UK. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so the idea here is matrix organizations you will find in very large businesses. That's point 1. Okay. You will find that these organizations will be multinationals. That means they'll work across a lot of geographies. And because the size of the organization is quite large, what they do is within their structure, they employ something which is called the matrix organization, and that allows individuals or heads within the organization to be able to report into a different geography for the purposes organized on the basis of their functions. Okay. A simple example that I would give, just to make it clear: if you have a Tesco store in London, one of the stores that you go to, now that general manager, the person who heads that particular store, as a general manager or as a director for that store, is able to work with a regional manager who manages maybe 10 other stores in that geography. Right?
Yeah.
Now, that particular store manager, for example, in Luton, also reports directly into the CEO of Tesco. But in terms of day-to-day operations and management of, in terms of day-to-day operations and management of daily activities, he actually works very closely with a regional manager who manages 10 such stores. So you see the difference. The difference is, for any strategic decisions which are related to that store, the CEO might pick up the phone and speak to that store manager, because that store's turnover on an annual basis about, say, is 100 million.
Yeah.
And is one of the largest stores in that in the country. So the CEO has access to that person, and indirectly the person can report into the CEO as well, because it's the largest performing store in the territory, for example. But in terms of day-to-day operations and activities, things like customer returns, things like discounts and other things, he is overseen in terms of his responsibility by a regional manager who manages maybe several of the other stores in that region, which add up to a turnover of, say, 500 million. Do you get that point?
Yeah.
Now, the other form, one we will look at would be a flat structure within the organization. If I can find it, I will just open it up. Give me 1 second. So sometimes there is a crisscross of different types of structures which also happens. You will see a functional overlap with the matrix organization as well. And this would be in the case of Microsoft, for example, as an example. Now, as a customer, when I see Microsoft as an organization, what I see it is as an organization which is product-based. That means you have Xbox or gaming division, you have Bing or search division, you have Windows Mobile, which is a separate business, you have Microsoft Windows operating system, which is a separate business. And then you have Microsoft Cloud Computing, which is a separate business. Have you seen that? Or, can you visualize it?
Yeah. Cloud. Well, I'm not really a Microsoft person, but I'm more like iOS and Android.
So
but yeah, I like them.
Yeah, brilliant. So if you look at Google, for example, as a company, what you'll get to see is Google as a company. What you will get to see that Google is organized as a search company. Google is organized as Android, a company, which is to say that which is like an operating system which is going across on a lot of other mobile phones. Yeah. So if I have to look at Google from outside, I see Google as a search engine company. I see Google as which basically makes and provides a Android operating system. Also as a company which has others, for example, navigation, and what get classification of moving classification based on performance. If you're using a product which is called apps, one of the things is called search or Google search engine, and that is nothing for a company's perspective. It is nothing but a product. So sometimes you will get to see that the companies externally are organized from a customer's perspective into product structures. But when I go into the company, you will find a Google engineer which is working on search could also be working on maps, could also be working on the Android system.
Yeah.
So do you see the difference? So externally, my perception is that the company is a product-based company. But when I work within Google, I might be an engineer working on 3 different codes with 3 different departments and working with 3 different project managers to be able to complete jobs given to me. The same piece of product code which is used in maps could be utilized in search and could also be utilized in the operating system, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Right. Just quickly going through, maybe I don't know what's wrong today, but this is the second time it's happened. Sorry. Just very briefly opening. So version of the presentation which I'm going to send to you would be to understand this. So the main idea that we want to look at is primarily how organizations are structured and how people within the organization follow that structure. So here we are looking at some key structures, which is PLAT, structures which are defined because of the span of control, chain of command, hierarchical, delegation, and empowerment. And each of this we have covered, but when I talked about Packard, for example, and I talk about product right now. So this is an example of an organization that you get to see which is organized by product oblique activity. So there is printing and imaging group, there is personal systems, which is computers, there is enterprise group, which is servers, there is services, and there is financial services. Can you see that?
Yeah. Okay.
Then the other is if it is geographically organized an organization. So you have Hewlett Packard, which is the head office is based in US. So you have Hewlett Packard Americas, you have Hewlett Packard operations in Geneva in Switzerland, which is managing all the Middle East, Europe, and Africa. And then you have the Asia Pacific operations based in Hong Kong. And this is nothing but the structure of the organization done on a basis of geography. Okay. And then what we do is we look at some we can look at in particular would be to look at structures which are based on the type which we talked about here, which is matrix, and within a matrix we looked at division, and within division we looked at functional. Is that okay?
Yeah.
This I won't bother. So what we understand, why we want to look at studying these structures is that we want to understand in a later stage in learning outcome 2 how the structure of the organization affects and shapes up the culture within the organization. So if it is a hierarchical organization, you will normally see autocratic or control-led people, wherein the role, the sheer responsibility will actually be vested within the department head or the organization head, and everything for decision making actually flows from bottom to the top. So when it comes to approvals, when it comes to budget, everything will go to the top. In the case of democratic, there will be delegation, and what you will see is the day-to-day routine and day-to-day decision making which has to be done within the organization will be with the department managers and the supervisors. And then we will also see that here would be when you look at Tesco stores in particular, when you go and shop, if there is an issue in one of the sections of the store, typically you will see a section or a supervisor will come in and, kind of deal with that problem. So giving you an example earlier, which I mentioned, was that if you had to go and do a return, that you'll go to the returns counter, and one of the managers there who's deputizing as a manager on that day will actually take care of all the returns. He or she will not need to speak or get authorization to be able to do a return from anybody within the store. And that would be delegation that you will get to see, and that kind of a structure will basically, or the leadership style would mean that it is more or less democratic. That means the person given the position and the authority at that level would be having the powers to be able to make decision, and his or her decision will be final.
Okay.
Have you seen that within the place that you work? What kind of structure do you have at the place of your work?
In what way?
In terms of organizational structure.
Well, yeah, there are different departments, because it's a local government I'm working in. It's a council, so we got like recycling department. We got social care, which is what I'm in, adult social care. We got social care for children as well.
Right.
You got purchasing. You got IT.
Right.
So there's quite a lot of departments. You got housing as well. And you got benefits. Tax office.
Okay. Tax office, okay, yeah, that's fine. Essentially, what you get to see that within the organization, have these or this kind of a structure is to make the operations more effective, to make the day-to-day activities more, achievable. And some of these groupings are also done from an angle that if these are things which are coming in on a day-to-day basis or happen on a routine basis, then there will be a set of people who would be much more, tuned and much more hands-on to deal with those set of issues or problems, and they'll be able to, manage it and then resolve it much more effectively. So that is one of the reasons why this departmentalization has been done.
Yeah.
Correct? And you cannot, and the other thing, the reverse perspective would be, or a flip side would be, that you cannot have an individual or a group of individuals within the organization or a business who have expertise in every particular area or every particular field. So in order for you to be able to look at effectively executing and meeting customers' demand or people that you interact with, what they do is they group you together in the form of the in the form of your specialty areas or expertise areas, and then you are put into particular departments which deal with those problems as a problem, kind of a troubleshooter. So you mentioned there are people who are in one of the departments, which is like, say, for example, the housing department. Now, they would have some sort of experience or background from the real estate or from a state agency and things like that, and they would be able to effectively manage, accommodation or, allocation of accommodation and living facilities, depending on the expertise in that area. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Or somebody who's managing the benefits department has been working within the department for a number of years and is inside out aware of, the key areas of benefits, types of benefits, things like he or she would be able to, execute and effectively work within the department to deal with those kind of issues on a daily basis. So in general, what I want to be able to look at today is that, this session to an end, what we want to be able to look at is understanding people as a resource within the organization and how they work within the structure of an organization when it is formed. And then we will know how communication happens between these structures. Today, what we've done is we've only looked at the organizational structure, one task, which is task 1.4, nothing else. But in the next session, what we're going to be able to look at is structures. What we want to know is the the type of control the structure exercises and how communication happens within that particular structure, within the employees, within the people working within that department. Okay?
Okay.
That's fine, brilliant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and send you this presentation, but tailored into 12 to 13 slides, rather than the 30-35 slides which has, and talk about the organizational structures for today's session, and then attach a handout which will actually talk about, which will basically give you a bit of additional reading for 4 or 3 pages, and give you 1 or 2 paragraphs on each of the structure advantages, and where do you get to see them as an example. Very concise.
Perfect.
Okay. Perfect. Now, in terms of our next session, do you know when is our next session? Tomorrow, I think.
Let me have a look. No, I think there was supposed to be one yesterday. Was there one scheduled for yesterday?
I don't know. There was one scheduled for yesterday, but I think I missed out on that particular session. So what I'm going to do is, are you available tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay. So tomorrow, depending on my availability, what I'm going to ask is, we will schedule this for 7 again, just like today, if that's okay with you. Yeah. And then we will basically catch up on this particular session that we do, we missed out on Monday.
Okay.
Is that okay? And then
yes,
what I'm going to try and do is do another session with you on 30th, and maybe do another session with you, on Friday.
Okay.
If that's okay. The reason is basically, bring this unit to sort of a quicker conclusion, because in this unit, you're looking at basically studying, things which are more or less practical.
Yeah.
And what I want to be able to do is, once I've gone through a few set of presentations, I want to be able to then basically give you some handouts to study, so that you can directly start firming up your assignment on this.
Okay.
Okay, the reason is because this is more or less a very practical unit, and I think from what we want to be able to do is, try and work along in this unit from point of view of, not just covering the unit, but also covering, the assignment. Let's slightly different approach, as far as this particular unit is concerned, so that you're able to, firm up and start units as well. Now, you get my emails on Hotmail as well now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I know you have 2 emails, which is Google email and tomorrow same time at 7 p.m. and 7 to.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, in terms of audibility today, and in terms of any distortion, was there any distortion?
Any distortions?
Yeah, any disturbance or distortions in the session in terms of the voice breaking up or anything like that?
Yeah, well, there's quite a bit here.
It was quite a lot, is it?
Yeah, not as bad as it was at first, but yeah, in this session there was quite a bit of breaking up more than the last session.
Right. Okay. That's fine. So, in some cases, what I would want to do is basically, if you need any recordings of the session, then I can send you the recordings of the session as well, just for you to go over in terms of at your spare time.
Okay.
Look at. But I think considering that we, normally end up sending you a slide or a presentation which is along with the handout, that should be nice. Okay. If you need that, do let me know, because some of the times I think some sessions I do end up not recording, because I forget during the course of this class. But apart from that, I can email them over to you for you to have a listen at a maybe later date or a later time, or just something like that. So that's it for today, Phil. Appreciate